Colleen Reynolds, and today's watercolor how-to art tip will be on pigment strength and paper state, or the wetness to dryness of your paper. It's one of the most challenging things to learn about watercolor, and so let's get started. So I'm set up on a clean piece of paper, and I'm going to mix up some tea strength pigment, and I'm going to go with that tea strength into a wet surface. And you can see I can't really hold a shape except at the edge of the shape where it's dry again. And then I've done the same thing on the dry paper on the third column. Now I'm going to use the same strength, and I've let the sheen go off the paper, so this is now damp, and you can see it's not as runaway as it was when I had the completely wet paper. So that's the first row using tea strength or weak pigment. So think of it as tea. And the next row, now we're going to use medium strength pigment. I put some of this on the top of those previous squares to show you, but when you see you tilt it, it just runs away. There's no control whatsoever. It's wonderful sometimes, but for the most part, wet on wet, you can't control where the paint goes. So I'm going to collect the edge on that because I don't want it to go back and do a background, which I'll show you later. I'm going to do the same thing on the dry square. Now I'm doing this all in one stroke. I call it the S caress, a very light touch. And you want to just, anytime you come off the paper, try to do something with your brush. Okay, then finally now I'm in really thick paint using the same process, going wet into wet. Then I'm going to do that on dry paper. Now you really have to get a good load on your brush to do this because it's a textured paper and you can get a dry brush effect like that. But you'll have to repeat the stroke, so use that S caress. Try not to come off and go back to your paper too much. And then finally I've let that dry back to a sheen, that middle square. I'm using thick paint again, trying to get all this pigment strength. This is almost like whipping cream, thicker than milk, but not quite as thick as butter at this point. And you can see when I tilt it, if it's damp, it won't run away like it does when it's wet. Now I've gone back in and I've done some thick paint on all the squares on top of the medium and the dry paint. And you can see that you can build up after the paper's dried back a little bit. You'll get different edges. And now you have to practice. This is a little tutorial on how to control the pigment strength and pay attention to the wetness or dryness of your paper. Thank you so much for watching this watercolor how-to art tip. Once again, this is Colleen Reynolds. I'll see you next time.